Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for the fourth and last lecture as part of Career Development and Mastering the Interview, a short course facilitated by IT Masters and Charles Sturt University, or CSU. My name is Guy and I'll be your MC tonight, and as always John Price will be your lecturer. We've just got some housekeeping before getting into things, as this is the last lecture. Next week from the 8th, the course exam will be available to students for a period of 1 week. You'll have until 11:59 Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time on the 15th of March to complete it. Despite this, it is best not to leave it until the last minute in case of technical difficulties. You're required to post in each week's forum before you can access the exam and earn your certificate. This can be done until the close of the exam period, but again, we recommend not leaving this until the last because you will not be able to sit the exam without having completed the homework. The exam consists of 40 multiple choice questions, which you will have 1 hour to complete. These questions are from content presented in John's lectures. Please note that the exam can only be attempted once, therefore do not attempt the exam until you are certain you are ready. A reminder email will be sent out, and if you have any technical difficulties, please email us at shortcourses@itmasters.edu.au. That's shortcourses@itmasters.edu.au as soon as possible. And for those of you that have missed that, or some of that, don't worry, John will repeat some of the relevant exam information at the end of this lecture, and it's also available on the IT Course Masters page, IT Masters course page, learn.itmasters.edu.au. One last thing, we also have a survey at the bottom of that learn.itmasters.edu.au page. It's a satisfaction survey, really. So once you have completed the course, we would really appreciate if you took a couple of extra minutes to complete that survey quiz, the link for which is found at the bottom of the page underneath the exam information. This quiz contains a few questions related to the short course that you just completed. Your answers will be reviewed at the conclusion of the course by the IT Masters administration team as part of our improvement strategy. Your feedback is really very valuable, and any feedback that does come in will help make future courses better, so please do have a look at that. But for now, I think we should introduce John for the final time. Hello, John.
Good evening, Guy, and good evening, everyone. Well, I'm very, very happy to be here tonight, not because it's the last session, but because we've got a really great opportunity tonight to bring together all the material that's being covered, all the learning that's being covered, and to increase the potential of you being able to apply in the nitty-gritty of a job interview, a performance interview, any situation where you need to impress others about your capabilities and your strengths. And also, the other benefit of tonight is because last week and this week we are doing significant revision, I'm pretty confident that if you're tuned in tonight or listen to this recording later, you will have all the information you need to be able to complete the exam with not a lot of extra revision. So it's a very good reason to be here as well. The other reason why I'm really pleased about tonight is we're trying something that is aimed at giving you the experience of seeing an interview, or hearing an interview in this case, hearing an interview in practice, that you will be able to sort of go back to and look at the component parts. And we've got a number of questions in the process such that you can then use that as a basis of pre-planning your own interviews. So I'm going to get straight into it, and we've got a lot of revision to go through. Initially, I'll go through the first part quite quickly because we have a lot to cover in you practicing the interview. And practicing the interview is what the core aspect of this session, the fourth session tonight. So we went through right from the beginning. I'm recapping on every aspect. Initially, we started with the wheel of life, the character strengths, developing. I'll just show these up because I'm going to go through them bit by bit. Each of these points, right up to preparing for the interview and follow-up. Remember the wheel of life? So critical that we have a framework in which to assess, well, where are we in our life at this point? Where are the priorities? If I'm career planning, am I at a situation where I can really throw myself into my career, or do I need to sort out a few parts of my life first, or am I happy to actually have a compromise? It's never advocating a balanced lifestyle, because that's a personal choice. And there are times in our career where we don't have a balanced lifestyle, and there are other times in our career where we hopefully do. And we measure ourselves against our positive emotions. Are we engaged? Are we engaged with what we're doing? What's the quality of our relationships? Do we have meaning in our lives? And what are our accomplishments? And when we've got that as the background, we're then in a position to move on and think about, well, I'm now pursuing the growth of my career. That's one of my key goals. And in order to do that, I need to be able to understand my strengths. So we decided that we would use an exercise of you being able to look at coloured cards and pick the strengths of those coloured cards, which you did very well. And raise the question next to say, well, what about our own strengths? We can pick out the strengths on a coloured card very well. We can pick out why we like that card, the colours, the atmosphere, the ambience. But what about analysing our own strengths? So we pointed to the www.viame.org site, which is just one list, but it happens to be one where there is a free test, and so many of you have gone and done that, and some of you have added additional strengths to this list. Hopefully you've been able to identify a number of your own strengths, because those strengths you'll use when we move into case studies, which I'll refer to soon. We then moved on to looking at Maslow's hierarchy of need. We said, well, why would we want to know about what Maslow thought? He was revolutionary at his time, but it's actually really relevant, because at times in our careers, we're actually more orientated towards our safety and security. You know, we actually feel at this point in time we've got so many financial commitments in different ways that we need to stay pretty well settled. And then at other times we want to really push it ahead, and we want to self-actualize. We want to grow our careers, do lots of creative voluntary work, create a legacy for ourselves in the future. So all that's there for is for you to be able to say, I know where I'm at, and if I'm interviewing somebody else, which many of you do, try and understand where they are. And if I'm encouraging other people, because I'm the supervisor, I'm the manager, I better not try and pitch anything at a level where they're not at. You know, if I'm talking about the growth of the company and people are feeling like they're haven't got their bonus in the last 6 months, there's a bit of a disconnect. Then we said, well, listening skills are important. And I want to emphasize to you about listening skills and say, these slides, by the way, are all slides that are in your pack already. These slides are slides that I've extracted from each of the sessions as a reminder, so that in this webinar, you can go forth and use this one webinar to do a complete revision without having to go back to all of the other webinars. But I wanted to be clear with you about why I emphasize listening so much. And it goes like this. Anyone with a bit of encouragement and a bit of practice can be a very good listener. And really good leaders are typically good listeners. Some you will find who are of a more narcissistic type style will build narcissistic type organizations, and they can actually get away without being good listeners. They spend the rest of their team spend time just listening to them. They become good listeners, if you like, but the CEO may not be. Good listeners are noticed. Senior management notice supervisors and key technical people, key project managers. How good are their listening skills? So it's not just about, okay, it'd be good to be a good listener. There is actually a real reason in a work sense to work hard at it. And we know that active listening is about a whole range of everything from the intuitive to the capacity to reflect, back listening to clarify, use open-ended questions. Even when we send and receive messages, we know that when we're sending the message, we hope the person at the other end is decoding that message, and we'll know if they have it because they'll feed something back to us. The feedback could be a smile. The feedback could be a nod. The feedback could be a question. The feedback could be a reflection. It could be a restating. And when the rapport isn't 100%, I mean, Guy and I have developed a good rapport, for example, our MC tonight, and so we can chatter away and have you know, I don't have to active listen him and he doesn't have to active listen me, like that with your good friends. But when you notice that the rapport's not quite there, you know, that you may be working with your boss and there's a little bit of discomfort, if you practice active listening, just watch the difference. We also said
96 or 7% now, John. 96 or 7.
Excellent, excellent. Well, those that have just tuned in, we're moving quickly through revision, and the revision is so important because tonight, if you look at the revision that we're doing tonight, it'll give you pretty much everything you need to be able to effectively do the exam that Guy outlined and I will outline again later on. From active listening, we said, look, emotions are really important in our lives, but different people relate to emotions in different ways. So if I'm in a team, what's really effective and what senior management will notice, if my language encompasses the area of emotional intelligence. And I pointed you to the GENOS International Organisation, founded in Melbourne, a great organisation that has simplified and done enormous research in this field. Emotions influence our decisions. It influences our behaviour, and emotions influence our performance. If we are managers and leaders, we notice our emotions. We modify our emotional responses. We notice other people's emotions and we assist them, or we couch things in such a way to assist them, and we notice when decisions are being made how much is emotion impacting on the decision. For example, if I'm in an organisation with a very strong, forceful personality and groupthink, which I don't think I need to define for you, groupthink is status quo, then we know that emotions are actually driving the decisions because people aren't standing up and pointing out their own individual point of view. And once we know that emotions are so important and understanding emotions, we can then go and spend time. It's been proven, evidence-based, that emotional intelligence can be improved. And if you go onto the site, as I said to you before, I've got no financial connection with GENOS. I just happen to admire them as an organisation. If you go onto their site, there's lots of material there and courses that are available. We then said, right, we've got this background. We've looked at our basis of where our life is. We've looked at everything down to our listening skills. Now let's have a look at what are the achievements that we've done in our lives. In our lives that we can use to demonstrate to others why we ought to be considered for promotion, or why they should give us funding for our startup organisation, whatever the case may be. Consider me for my next job. Case studies encompass looking at the situation, understanding what's the approach that was taken, my personal contribution, and what was the total outcome. Case studies written up in a page or half a page on achievements and put in the file so they're ready and available when we have to give a presentation, ready and available when we are in an interview. And with the case studies firmly in our mind, what happens? Well, we can talk about dates. We can talk about people's names. We can impress an interviewer by the very fact that we are so sharp. How could they possibly bring that to course? We then offer the case studies at the end of the interview. And that helps the interviewer who wants to promote us, if you like, or advocate us because we are the number one person in the shortlist. That gives them the ammunition to go and advocate when they've got 50,000 other things on their plate and can't remember the exact things that took place in that interview. And their boss says a week later, how did you get on with the shortlist? And you're number one on the shortlist, and your advocate now pulls out the case studies. I'll leave it to you to work out what happens next. We moved on to goal setting. Why is goal setting so important? It's kind of like if I don't know where I'm going, how the hell am I going to get there? And goals need to be ones that are really about us, congruent, goals that we can relate to, because when we put down the execution plan, how am I going to get there? If it's not real to us, chances are excuses will get in the way. So we ask ourselves, are the goals that I'm pursuing now goals of other people? We all have goals put onto us by the organisation we work for, such as the organisation's targets, the organisation's completion dates, the organisation's quality standards. We all have those goals, but intermixed with all that are our personal goals, which when we overlay the company goals, everything starts to make a lot of sense. And we need to be able to modify them based on the circumstances. We then wanted to say, well, we've got all this, we've got our goals, we know the sort of roles we may have, so we want to have a look at the marketplace. We want to have a look at the skills and competencies that we have as our armory and accept the fact that we're a product. We're a product that's going to market, and by doing that we kind of desensitize it a bit. Sorry folks about the desensitization, but we desensitize it a bit so that we can think outside the dots and say, what initiatives have we really taken? And I've suggested that you keep a journal to do so that you can remember step by step. We then looked at the marketplace from the perspective of the contacts that we might have. What's the presence in social media? What are jobs being advertised in the media, in the recruitment ads, in the agents, all stuff that's sort of, you don't need to do a webinar to know that. But how many individuals keen to apply for a new role spend time targeting the marketplace of where they'd like to work, the sector that they'd like to work, and put a phone call through to that organisation in advance of them putting an advertisement in the paper or putting it on Seek or putting it out into the marketplace and being ahead of the game. I talked about LinkedIn. You all know about LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is a good way to identify some of the people that you might be applying to jobs and the people that might be your interviewers. I then said, well, okay, well, these jobs, what are the titles of the jobs that I might be applying for? The jobs that I might be applying for may be well known to us. I'm a senior project manager. I'm looking for another project management role. But on the other hand, if I'm trying to map it out, it'd be nice to know, well, what are all the titles out there? And the ACS Foundation, an organisation that I'm a board director of, have been for many years, is a great organisation that finds work integrated learning scholarships for students at university. They have come up with a design here that covers the content and design space, the technology services, business services and product development. In last week's webinar, there were 4 more slides that broke this into detail. I draw this to your attention purely so that you can refer to that at a later stage. You've secured the interview, and now we have to think about, well, what's the physical environment? What's the timing? What's the research? what are the questions during and the end of the interview I should apply, and I better study the job description. Because in the job descriptions, you'll be amazed at the number of people that come into an interview and actually haven't really studied the job description, underlined it and brought out the key points of the job description, nor the piece that's quite often advertised as the person profile and compared their own personal profile against that, so that they can see, well, frankly, I'm not such a great fit here, but I'm a terrific fit there. How do I overcome the piece that I'm not such a great fit at? I'll work on those pieces. And in the physical, it's what's my attire? What fits with the organisation I'm going to have an interview with? You can read the slide. Timings. Be 15 minutes early. Take time to cool off. Allow for contingencies on the day. See on maps exactly where the building is that we're going. And ideally, if you've got time and you're in the area where you live, which may or may not be probable, do a reconnaissance. Go there over the weekend beforehand. And then, and I've been talking very quickly, kind of high up their energy tonight, but before the interview we need to consider our mental and emotional state. We will do this exercise in a few minutes in preparation for you answering some questions, but I hope some of you have practiced that, and or some other technique that you use which is complementary. A chap that I'm coaching at the moment is telling me, he's promised me he's doing it twice a day. He had an important presentation to give last week, and I was coaching him in advance of that speech, and he told me afterwards that he felt far more composed having done the exercise. And we said, right, we're now in the interview. What are the types of questions and comments to prepare? And I suggested that being observant and being able to demonstrate that one has done their research, one can find a way to make a comment that tells the interviewer just how astute you are. I know banks aren't seen as necessarily top of the pops and the most exciting places to work, but by golly, they employ a hell of a lot of people, and I know some people that are doing some pretty great systems development work in banks. So even a bank situation, one can make a comment about the creative way in which the bank is engaging with customers in their social media presence and etc. for the logistics, whatever the company may be, whatever its business. And for senior people, one goes a step deeper and assesses what the company's doing and make perhaps a comment about research and development, or even points to the social corporate responsibility partnerships that one might have. One of the big consulting firms had a great project up in the very north of Queensland, assisting some of the indigenous communities in terms of their management, and that was a real turn on for many candidates to think that, wow, I could get a chance to be involved. We then worked on and said, I'm moving into the interview, I'm there, I'm right in the room. I need to have direct contact. A warm smile goes a long way. When I shake hands, what do? I'm conscious of culture issues, yes. I notice there's some media play about this, which I imagine will be quite controversial. I take a middle line and say, you know, just be aware. One might be being interviewed by someone who, from a cultural background, just doesn't automatically shake hands. For some females, it can be an embarrassing situation, and therefore, if you're the interviewer, one needs to be conscious of that and not offer the hand. And remain standing until offered a seat. If you are shaking hands, use the same pressure as the person offering it, and if you're offered tea and coffee, ask for water. We know why. We want to not have the interview disrupted because we've only got 3/4 of an hour to an hour to get across our message. And then you're in the situation of applying what you've studied. there's a good question to use the double chair exercise. I hope you're doing that. And once you're in the interview and you get to feel the pulse, you're then in a position to be able to say, well, I can do all of this, I can handle this job description, but I can actually do more. There's the job description, but boom, boom, I've got these other characteristics, these other experiences that I can offer to the company, to the organization. I use the word organization in this series of webinars more than company because I'm conscious that we may be applying for roles at universities, research bodies, federal, state, local government. So I tend to use the word organization rather than companies. Be mindful that if one is showing extra capability, that one prefaces it by explaining that I'm very pleased to do the job that's being offered. I'm just letting you know I can do these other things. I don't want you to think that I'm overqualified. I then gave you some questions to ponder on, and I hope you've had a chance to practice those using the two-chair technique. An even more challenging question, and I'd ask you, well, I'd recommend to you that you at some stage ask yourself this question and answer it either to a friend, a confidant, your coach, or without all of those, that terrific person that moves from one chair to another and changes personality. You know the one I mean? That one. It's you. We then moved on to ask about weaknesses. The weaknesses question is always a question that crops up. I have another slide on this later and I'll go over it. And we talked about concluding the interview and the follow-up. The sort of questions that one can ask at the end. We also wanted to get a feeling before we left the interview of, well, where is this all going? How many times have I heard candidates say, I've applied for this job and then I didn't hear anything, or I've applied for this job and I've been interviewed and I still haven't heard anything. 2 weeks go by. So we want a dialogue with the person or people or panel who are interviewing us. So we want to ask them, you know, what's the process that will be followed based on the interview? When will you, with my referees? These are all what I call trial questions that will extract an answer. And of course, the great question is, would you like a hard copy of my case studies? They're already coming through to you in soft copy, but would you like a hard copy now? So that if you're talking to your boss this afternoon, by the way, you're not saying this, but you're thinking, if they're talking to their boss this afternoon and their boss is the one who's making the final decision, they'll have some ammunition to advocate on our behalf. So we then had the homework. And I'm hoping that you had a good crack at this. I'm hoping that, you know, practice makes perfect in this world, and it's amazing. You can turn a practice exercise into a habit. And focusing exercise, when that becomes a habit, it's very powerful. The two-chair exercise is only there if you haven't got a real coach or someone who can be the trial interview for you, but it's valuable at certain times. I hope you did the homework, and if you haven't, please have a go at it before the exam, because it'll help you tremendously. So here we go. We've been just under half an hour into our session, and we haven't started on the new content for week 4, and I've explained why we've done such a degree of revision. So I'd like you now to stay with me just for a bit and enter into this session with a focusing exercise. Because we've revised all of the sessions. We've talked about the focusing for the interview, but we're going to do that right now. We're going to have a series of example questions with guidance on how to approach each one. And then Guy and I, by the way, Guy's other name is William, which you'll find out about. How are you, William?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. I hope you're preparing to interview this bloke later on.
I'm limbering up, yeah.
Limbering up? Excellent.
Yep.
Good. Pleased to hear it. So we're going to do a long demonstration interview later, and that interview is one where you'll have the opportunity of not only taking notes but asking questions, and you'll then have an extended question and answer session on the whole of the 4 webinars, and I'll then provide you with some advice on preparing for the exam before we say au revoir to each other. So I hope you're all happy to do this. Please take a comfortable position. I'm going to let this run for just over 30 seconds. Comfortable position. Remember we said, you know, a kind of meditation exercise takes about 20 minutes. Most people teach that. We started off doing this exercise for 2 minutes, and I said, look, to be practical, we want to be able to do this in the bus, in the train, on the way to the interview. We want to be able to do this in the waiting room without people noticing us. So we need to break this down to 30 seconds. So here we go. 3 deep breaths. Close the eyes. Give yourself a nice big sigh. Ease into your chair and bring your attention to the breathing. Allow the breathing to be at the tip of the nostril. Allow yourself to envisage the peaceful place that we practiced, wherever that may be. Remain breathing. Be conscious of the breathing, the tip of the nostrils. Deep breathing. 3 more deep breaths. And allow the eyes to open and a nice big stretch. With that in mind, and being hopefully composed to move on to interviewing, I'd like you to make sure you've got your 2 chairs in position, because tonight is where the rubber hits the road. We're practicing all the things that have been taught. And I'd like you to now take a little time, a very short amount of time, and Guy will bring us back into this, a couple of minutes only, where you ask the question from the chair and stand up, move to the other chair and answer it. Let's start off with the very first question. How do you handle tasks that are repetitive? Guy, can you take over here?
Sure. And we're approaching 30 seconds now, John.
We should let this run another 30 seconds, please, Guy. People need a minute to quickly answer this question.
Sure. Okay. Okay, that is 1 minute.
So, back into our chair. Why would someone ask this question, and why is it so important? Well, how many of us have a job that doesn't have a significant repetitive component? There's got to be somebody out there. But most jobs do have a repetitive component. Some jobs less than others. Some very creative research type jobs are constantly moving on to new things. One could say, if one's in sales, that I'm always meeting a new person. And certainly when I was running executive recruiting and executive search firms, in the latter years I did less interviewing, but I certainly did enough interviewing to last a lifetime. There was repetition, but the person was always different. So when an employer is asking this question, they're wanting to know if the person they're interviewing has actually understood the job. Do they know the job? Because some people can get bored very quickly and be looking to new and greener pastures, putting more demands on the business, become what you'd call high maintenance. So when that question, if it ever arises for you, is asked, be mindful of what's behind the question. What's behind the question? Give me an example of when you thought out of the box for a solution at work, when you thought out of the box, when you were creative. That question would be asked, I guess, for pretty obvious reasons, but the job might just happen to be one where it's in a very narrow span and creativity is not exactly what they're looking for. On the other hand, it may be an organization that wants everybody to demonstrate some form of creativity. So I would ask you to consider having answers ready for these types of questions which are authentic, which come from your experience. What are your goals for the next 5 years? Well, an important component of this program, this series, this webinar, was about setting goals. So 5 years might be a long stretch, but I think 5 years is a good thing to think about. It's the big picture. We've only got detailed goals handling us probably for the next 6 to 12 months. Why do you think they're asking the question? If the answer to the question is that I'd like to be managing director and we're applying for a role as a project manager, that could be taken as a real positive by some employers. It also could be a statement of, I wonder how realistic this person is. Of course, the very next question would be pretty obvious, eh? Well, tell me, what are the steps that you think you might take to get there? So the sort of answer you give, one needs to be a little conscious of how are the goals that I present resonate with the person who's interviewing me. Tell me what motivates you. If I said to you, tell me what motivates you, and you're in the lift and you're going from level 1 to level 15, do you think you could answer that question? In the startup world, for startup business, they call it the elevator pitch. If you can't get out the reasons why someone would want to invest in the company or join the company, by the time one gets to the doors opening, your answer is probably too long. Think about developing answers for what motivates you. The next one, I'd like you to try. Get ready to ask yourself the question, have you ever had a bad experience with an employer? Have you ever had a bad experience with an employer? A succinct answer that tells what the situation was, how it was dealt with, and what was your learning experience. What was the situation, how was it dealt with, and what was your learning experience? Guy, I hand over to you, same amount of time.
Thank you. We are now approaching 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so in a real situation, one might perhaps take a little longer than 1 minute, but hopefully you've been able to get that across to the interviewer, having moved to the other chair. Questions like this can be thrown in and can take people off guard. You know, we probably all had an experience with an employer that wasn't great. And the question is not about what was the experience. The question was about what did we learn from it? What did we gain from it? And so we answer the question, that's what we think. There's more questions. Now, why do you think you'll be successful in this company and this job? This is a very standard question. You know, it's one of those kind of lazy questions that an interviewer might ask while they're getting their thoughts together. A nice big general question. Well, why do you think you'd be successful in the company and this job? So that's where, by analysing, you've done the research on the company. You've done the research and you're pleased with the sector that it's in. Or not. You may just be happy with the job. You've worked out you're fit to the position. You've written your case studies up. You're now in a position to be able to answer this question with ease. I think I'd be successful in the role because of X. And X was demonstrated by boom, 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 case study. The other thing tells me that I'd be successful in it is in studying the organisation, the culture of the company seems to me to be a really close fit to what I'm looking for. I've worked with other companies that are a bit similar. For example, when I worked at company Y, they did so-and-so and so-and-so. Tell me about your childhood. Wow. Now that could go anywhere, couldn't it? But if anybody ever did ask you that question, and I'd suggest you don't bother asking it of a candidate, once again, what's the question that they're asked? What's the reason for the question? Are they looking to see I had a stable childhood? Are they looking to see that I overcame problems as a child? Are they asking the question to test my resilience as a child? You pick a slice that demonstrates one aspect of that. Resilience, perseverance, and capacity to work with others, perhaps role models, and where there haven't been role models, what the advantages there were of not having a role model, by building grit, by building inner strength. What is a salary level you think appropriate for this job? Okay, how would you answer it? I can't hear you, but tell me, how would you answer it? I'll tell you how to answer it, or at least I'll give you my opinion of how to answer it. salary is an area, salary and benefits is an area in first interview that one doesn't go to. One only goes to that if one is asked. And if one is asked, why don't we wait till I do the example interview and you'll hear how I did it in that situation. And in the meantime, think about it. Tell me how you handled a major crisis, either in your personal life or at work. Good question. Great question. They're looking for a real example there. And the example you'll give, of course, is already in your case studies because you've got them prepared. You've got right smack bang front of mind. Probably even able to quote the names of the company and the people that you work with, by first names, obviously. Do you have any regrets in managing people? Please provide an example. I won't ask you to do that one because some of you aren't managing people. Many of you are. Many more of you will be managing people once you've done a master's. But I guess we've all had experience. I certainly have had experience and regrets in terms of how I might have managed a situation with people. What did I learn from it? Did I actually take the learnings and grow from it? That's what the interviewer wants to know. Now I'd like to bring you back to the question which I want you to be able to be fully prepared for in advance. This is the weakness question that I highlighted before. If it crops up, it may come in different language. The language may come nicely as, let me call you, Fred and Mary, right? Whichever one's appropriate. Fred or Mary, tell me about areas in yourself that you would regard are open for self-development. Open for self-development. Nice way of putting it, isn't it? Nice soft way of putting it. What they're basically asking you, what are your weaknesses? We identify one or two I suggested, and we practice them. Authentic things that are self-development or what you regard as weakness. Authentic areas that we say, this was what the situation was then. I gave you my example before. Remember the example I gave? About finding a bit difficulty in terms of saying no to people asking me to do things. How did you work on it? Well, over the years I got better at it because I realized that I needed to prioritize in order to stop working so many hours in the day. And now the situation is that it's much easier for me to say no because I know what the priorities are, and I very nicely say to people, I'd love to do that for you, but I won't be able to do it this week or next week, but I will be able to, if it suits you, to be able to start the week after. And of course, that might be something you temper a little differently in your boss is saying to you, hey mate, this is the priority, it needs to be done now. But I'm putting this in context. Have a sequence of answers. It will serve you well. And when it comes to dealing with questions about your work experience, just have a read of the slide. And as I've said to you before, look, I've done these slides in a manner so that they're a reference for you. It breaks all the rules about having 3 nice key points on a slide, all the same font. We haven't done any of that because I wanted these to be for you to have as a reference. Key thing is, how can I give evidence base to what I've done? Where are the assumptions of what I can do? I use the example of vendor qualifications in the IT sector is one of the few ways outside of particular degrees and particular training courses that enables one to be able to, by stating that qualification, the interviewer knows that you can do X. People like some of the major TAFEs, like Box Hill, when students come out of there, they've already come out with certification in Cisco, certification in Novell, not Novell, that's days gone by with Microsoft. unlike a chartered accountant who, when a chartered person says, I'm a chartered accountant, there's an expectation that they can walk into any business and should be able to tear the balance sheet and profit and loss statement apart and know where the company is. So it's a question of thinking about how can I demonstrate with evidence. So now it brings us to the point that Guy and I are going to attempt to do a demonstration interview with you. And I'd like to say this at the outset, that I trust this on Guy, who, as you can tell, has got very good verbal skills and has lots of experience in speaking, but he has not been what I've asked him to be. I've asked him to be the CEO of an IT startup in the renewable energy field. Me as the candidate, I'm being me because I could be a candidate for that. I actually quite like the job. I'm thinking about it. I'm the non-executive chair applicant for this company. I just want you to note the questions that are asked, note the method of answering, and I want to put on the table that you may tear strips on some of the things that I have to say. I'm answering this off the cuff as well, but I will try to bring out some of the points that we have been through. Here is the background to the interview. Have a read.
And as John has said, don't steal Zone Trio. He's very keen on it, folks.
I like the name Zone Trio. I don't want to see this with registered in the websites tomorrow. So Zone Trio, the job description, the person specification, the experience level that's being sought, and the founder who's conducting the interview. That's what you typically see elaborated more as a background. So the purpose of this is, I put a caveat, it's intended as an example, it's not a template for either questions or answers. I'll demonstrate using case studies, but because of confidentiality, because they'll be real case studies, I won't mention the company by name. If I was in an interview, I would. I won't use people's names who are real people, because that would be potentially breaking confidentiality, given the fact that this series of videos or webinars will be available for some time. At the end, I will cover the closure of the interview and follow-up. And I want to point out that because we have Guy as our MC and as our founder of this company in the example, it could also be a female who's the CEO founder. And so I just want to make sure that that diversity point is on the table. We happen to be a bit male dominated with the two of us here. So
welcome to Zone Trio, John. Sorry to keep you waiting. I'm impressed by early arrivers, but I wasn't available until the top of the hour. Sorry. Would you like something to drink? Some tea, coffee, or water, perhaps? Oh,
a glass of water would be great, thanks, William. William, sorry, just by the way, do you prefer William or would you prefer Bill?
No, I like Bill. Yeah, Bill? Thanks, John. No need for pomp and ceremony here. But good. We've got some water here. We prepared it earlier, so now we can get right into things.
Thanks very much.
I guess, John, I'll start with just saying thanks for being with us today. We haven't had a non-executive chairman before. I know you've done a little bit of research because I hear you've been speaking to a couple of advisory board members and just about your plans. And I'm just wondering, during this interview, I'll be seeking to find whether you're maybe a good fit in terms of what you're looking for and what we're looking for in Zone Trio. So with that in mind, could you please tell me what would attract you to chairing the board of a relative startup like Zone Trio?
Indeed. And just before doing that, I'll just take it out of interview for 1 second. What you'll see in the upcoming slides is both the question and then some of the key points out of the answer. And we've put these in here for you by way of reference, because otherwise all you would have is a basis of going back to a recording, which can be time consuming. So that's why they are there. So I'm now back in interview. Well, Bill, thank you for even the question, because, you know, to me, the thing that would attract me in terms of being a chair of Zone Trio is that I really like the space. I've researched this space, and to me, not only is it important for the community, but I think it's extremely important both for our country and the world for that matter. And so to be able to make a contribution in something that I actually also feel strongly about, I think that's an important fact, so I'd have my energy and motivation there. I also believe from the case studies that I've had in my career of being involved with many startup organizations and being the startup founder of 3 myself, is that the role of a chair to give an objective perspective is very valuable, and people have said about me that they regard my objectivity, and I'll give you people obviously if we go further to speak to about that. Also, having read up about you and your colleagues, I think I get the impression that you really wanted to drive this forward, and therefore that you would be open to coaching and open to mentoring, and that mentoring, I may be a conduit to introduce you to others. I have a very extensive network that I think could be valuable, and therefore that would motivate me to think that I could do that. And that network of partnerships, of course, would also potentially lead on to future funding, which I believe you're very interested in. Is that the sort of thing that you wanted me to cover?
Yeah, absolutely. You're certainly right. You know, that I'm glad that you said that you're interested in mentoring and coaching, because, you know, as you know, we're a startup that is getting to the point where we are looking to expand and become, I guess, more professional in terms of corporate governance. So that'd be good. And I see from your resume that you do have quite a bit of experience as a board member. Could you tell me what have been your key learning experiences as a board member?
Very pleased to do that. I mean, being a board member and being a chair of a board is fundamentally about governance. And governance is a very broad statement. It's not just about financial matters. It's about how the company operates ethically, how the company operates internally, how the company deals with shareholders, how the company deals with the people that lend them money, how the company presents itself to the outside world. So one of the situations I was placed in as a chairman of the board of a startup, but quite a multifaceted one, was that I needed to ask the founders at a later point to go off the payroll. A very difficult question to ask, and obviously it didn't come as a complete surprise to them, but when the company's financial position at a point just prior to funding coming through for a second or third round, there was no room for the sort of payroll that was being drawn by the founders, and they needed to bite the bullet, and I had to explain to them why. And of course, as board directors, we stopped drawing fees as well. In another situation, a merger was proposed, and I was struggling with the concept of the merger because I had read so many case studies of mergers that had failed, and I put through an exhaustive program of investigation, and probably some people were disappointed at the end when we decided not to merge, but we feared, and I was able to get the point across to the founders that it was beneficial to make sure that we didn't go out of business by growing too quickly and dealing with the problems that somebody else had created. Also, on a number of occasions, there have been market strategy changes that have taken place through our strategic planning sessions. And over time, we've needed to attract quality and diversified people into the organisations that I've been on the board of. And that means I've needed to go out to networks and also apply my skills in assessing candidates, but in so doing, being very mindful of the fit to the founders, not the fit to me if I was doing something else. And so I think my experience of being able to be in the headspace of the founders and yet draw on a lot of years of experience has been something that I regard as not only learning experiences but hopefully value add to the companies concerned. I hope that's not too wordy a response for you, Bill.
No, I'm a bit wordy myself, John, but no, thanks. It's interesting. It sounds like well, I assume it will be an interesting relationship between, the two founders, Maxine and myself, and the non-executive chair.
And in saying that, if I may just cover one point with you, if I can, but in saying that, you find it interesting of how that might fit together, and share with me, what are some of the conversations that you and Maxine have had?
Well, we're both young, ambitious people with, I suppose, extensive experience and great ideas, I like to think, in renewable energy and IT. But we don't really have a great idea about corporate governance and all that entails, and really the business side of things. And this is exactly why we're looking for someone of your ilk. And you were talking about talking to founders about going off payroll. Can I just throw a situation at you? Say maybe where a company like ours is in fundraising, and one approach would benefit the majority of shareholders. That would benefit the majority of shareholders. Would go against the best financial interests of us. How would you handle that sort of governance situation?
And I guess the situation could be reverse, Bill. Where it's benefiting the founders and not so much the other shareholders. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Maxine and I are certainly looking for someone that is able to, I suppose, rein us in a little bit if we are going off doing our own thing and perhaps half-cocked.
Well, one of the things that I've learned over the years is to have good advice, and good advice comes from not just your chair of the board, not just the other directors, but the specialists in the field. And so the structuring of shareholder agreements, the detailed structuring of how shall we say, the dilution of shareholding will take place under different circumstances, the escrowing of shares in the case of a public listing, and really trying to avoid circumstances that can create a conflict of interest, and is one that a chair has to be particularly mindful, and this is a real example of governance. And so if a circumstance like that did arise, and that may well be, I think, more so in a situation where it might benefit the existing shareholders and not the other shareholders on questions of dilution of shares, then it's up to the chair and other board to sit down with the founders and say, look, sit down with you and Maxine in this case and say, look, yeah, what are the values that you came into the business with? How do you actually want to look at each other in the mirror, and how would you like each one of your staff to go forth and present the company in terms of that? And the sort of people that you are, I'm sure that what you'd be wanting to have is to make sure that there was an equality, that those employees that have got share options, for example, can feel that they're being protected and looked after by the people that own the majority of shares. And in other words, represent all shareholders, and including those smaller shareholders. But I think it tells me a lot about you and Maxine and your colleagues to even ask this question. It gives me a very deep feeling of your, I guess, question of an importance you place on ethics, Bill.
Yeah, certainly. I could even extend the question to, perhaps a conflict of interest between shareholders and the best interests of our customers or the company moving forward and its image? Yeah, they're certainly interesting questions to think about. But yeah, from the sounds of it, you're sort of on the same page. So perhaps if we can go forward a couple of slides, if we assembled a group of people who had worked with you or for you or you reported to, what sort of range of word pictures do you think we would receive? How do you think people would view you?
One of the great things, Bill, about asking that sort of question is that we know that everyone's going to have a different perspective. And so potentially what I think people may say and what they say will be a test of my emotional intelligence. And so I trust that that'll come forth if you go into referencing and we mutually decide that we go forward on this. But look, I think you'd find that people would say that I'm a high energy person. I'm enthusiastic and I have a balanced perspective. I'm very strong on the appreciation of effort all the way through an organization and keeping records of the good things that people do. I think that most people would say that I'm fair, a good listener and a coach, and that I persevere. And some would say that at times I get so busy that I can appear to be a bit dismissive, and I've learned that about myself and need to pull myself back, and at times I may take on a little bit too much, but I've got much better at doing that over the years. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a balanced perspective, Bill.
Yeah, and on that taking on too much, do you think if you were to take on this role that would sort of be the straw that broke a camel's back, to coin a phrase? Do you actually have the capacity do you think, to commit?
Very good question. The answer is yes, and I thought about that well before coming to interview. Fortunately, I've been able to...
Would, yeah.
No, seriously, Fortunately, I've been able to organise myself in such a way that at this stage of life, I choose the things that I want to do. And so on the work front, and those things that I don't, I'm fortunately able to not have to be working day by day, and so I'm very comfortable that I could spend the necessary time with you. And as a chair, that time would probably round out to probably not much more than 2 to 4 days a month, and probably some intense periods where it might be every day of the week, but only for short periods of time. Does that fit in with what you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there will be times where there will be quite literally nothing to do, or there's always something to do, but something at a low priority. But when we really do need someone, it would be really great to have that kind of ability to scale up and down. So that's great. Talking about word pictures, we asked you about yourself. What about you? What do you think that what's your ideal sort of person profile, or what sort of character do you think you'd like to work with? What are your expectations of us?
Let me be very brief on that. I'm really looking for honesty and no surprises. What I'm looking for in founders of a company is that they tell me what is happening, even though I may not be expected to act on it. So it's no surprises. It's confidentiality. It's knowing that conversations that we have are confidential, and that the founders make themselves available for the critical times that we need to move through strategic issues, for example. But when I say available, I know how many stresses are on the plate of founders, right, in terms of time availability. So that's why I make the point. And the other one is really that being prepared to listen. I think being prepared to listen to advice, that doesn't necessarily mean you always take it, but being prepared to listen. Those are the things. Are those things that you think you can accommodate, Bill?
I like to think so. We certainly value open and honest lines of dialogue here at Zone Trio. Maxine and I pretty interested in keeping it as little of a hierarchy as possible with regard to company structure. Of course, there's responsibilities, but we think that everyone should have a say and be able to have a voice.
And also, from hearing that, you're really talking about all the same things. I mean, I feel as if we're sort of tic-tacking on an equal sort of values. Is that how you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm getting fairly comfortable with that, and I suppose we may as well just tackle some hard questions now. Given that we're a startup, what are your expectations by way of directors' fees?
Now look, I want to come out of interview on this particular question, everyone, because this is a really important teaching point, and therefore the next two questions I'd like to step us out of interview for a moment. It's really important in the first interview not to talk about money unless you're asked. And the nice way of demonstrating this, and it's probably I'm talking about, it comes from my kind of HR industry background a bit, but remuneration fees are determined by two factors. Internal parity, how other people are being paid, at what roles. And external competitiveness, what's the market paying for the same roles. And capacity of the organisation to pay. The meeting I had just prior to coming to this webinar was with a very experienced venture capital head who is now involved in a number of startups. Many of his companies in the past were both startup and mezzanine organisations. And he explained to me how they are about to bring into the country someone who's been here, gone back home, coming back in again, someone that they will bring in on a salary level that is actually beneath the marketplace, but it's being supported by equity. So remuneration can be in many different forms. And then, so you say to the company, look, the basis on which I would consider the fee question is based around, what's currently being paid in the marketplace for this level, sort of getting a gauge of what other fees are being paid by the company to other professionals, and also the company's capacity to pay and the capacity to blend straight remuneration with forms of equity. Really, what you do is you take it back to the company for their judgment. You don't answer the question, right? You don't answer the question with any specific. Now, if they came back to you and it's a role where, it's kind of like in a tight range, and they say, well, look, that's well and good, but there's not much good us continuing if you're $15,000 out of our range, then in circumstances like that, hopefully you've researched the job well enough and you know your own situation to be able to answer that just openly. There you go, Guy.
Okay. So, John, yeah, thanks for that. Do you have any further questions? I'm pretty comfortable. Just wondering if you would like to know anything about us or me or anything at all.
And once again, I'll take this out of interview because it's such an important period. This is an important opportunity, and we should be prepared and advanced so that we're confident and composed. Preparing some questions such as, and I'm just giving you this as an example, it may not be appropriate to the particular situation. Like, I would appreciate your perspective on the organisation as an employer. I mean, you've been with the company for X number of years, whatever they've given you an indication in the opening, or it may have come up in conversation that they said, I've been with the company for 15 years, and you picked that up early on because you're a good listener, and now you feed it back, having been with the company for 15 years, maybe you could give me your perspective on the company or the organisation as an employer. Or, you might be, I'd be really interested to learn more about the organisation's social responsibility program. Can you talk with me about opportunities for future training and generally about staff development? Questions that are pitched at a level that you're at. So if this is your first job interview, then it's going to be questions like the social responsibility question because you've read it on the website. is going to be like the first question. And it might be about the third question. If you're an existing manager today seeking a more senior role, then it'll be questions potentially about the strategic path of the organisation. You know, what's the direction of the company going forward? Or it might be, you know, there's a lot of competition in this particular space. How's the company dealing with that in terms of existing strategies? So it's demonstrating that the person has read, understood the marketplace and the company. Can't emphasize this to you too much. Prepare the questions in advance. It takes all the stress off you if you prepared the questions in advance. It's a bit like the weakness one. Guy.
Okay. So I suppose you're wondering about what next? Do you have any particular time frame that you'd be interested in?
Well, look.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, please finish what you're saying.
Because Maxine and I are probably pretty busy for the next week or so, but we'd certainly be interested in firming up our shortlist and perhaps giving phone calls next week if you're available.
Well, thank you for you've really answered the first of my questions, and that was really the process that you intend following, because I think it can be very difficult for founders of organisations. You'll meet a number of people that you would think. Let me just say, you know, as a director and as a chair, that I'd be grateful for some quick feedback, not just because I'm considering other situations, and I'll say right at the outset that this is definitely the opportunity that I'm most interested in and most enthusiastic about. So I'd appreciate some feedback as early as possible to know whether we want to go forward. Having heard what you've had to say today, I'll put on the table I'm interested in another conversation, a more deep conversation, perhaps meeting with Maxine and some of your other colleagues. And you know, I really appreciate the opportunity of discussing the role and learning more about the business. And once again, I'm really very interested in the position.
Great. Well, we will endeavour to get through that process as promptly as possible, because we are looking to appoint someone relatively quickly. So yeah, I'm certainly very comfortable. I will be talking at great length to Maxine about you and other candidates. So perhaps we'll give you a call next Tuesday to confirm one way or another whether we go forward.
Thank you very much indeed, Bill, and I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So there we are, everybody. I really...
Sorry, John, just one last question. I'm wondering, you wouldn't happen to have a hard copy of your case studies around, would you?
I'm so glad you mentioned that, you know, because you've got the soft copies, and I've got them sitting here right on the table in front of me, and I haven't offered them to you, so I'm so pleased you asked for that. And I do have those right here, and I'm pleased that you want them, because in some cases case studies are things that people want to take the hard copy away, and other times people just print it off from what they have on the document that I provided you. So by all means, please take the case studies.
No, I'm flooded in emails, so thank you very much there. I think it'll be really handy when I try and remember just what we talked about.
Indeed, and particularly when you're in a situation with all the things that are on your plate, to perhaps forget some of the things that we've said today, you'll be able to draw on that without having to go back to your notes, Bill.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay, so thank you for that. And there's a good example of how, you know, Guy's just prompted me there for that, but you would be saying, here's the case studies, are you interested? And clearly in this particular case, he's so keen to get the case studies, he wants them, which is it. So he's got the message. Now,
Bill's got a mind like a sieve.
So I guess the thing that we can now do is say, you know, what did you notice about the types of questions As you couldn't see the body language, what did you notice about the voice tone for both William and John? Was there a connection there? Write down 3 positive observations you could use in your interviews. We're not specifying homework out of this week because you're preparing for the exam, but I'd like you to just, for your own benefit, to write down positive impressions that you gained. And I really hope, heartfelt this is, I really hope that you appreciated us pulling that together, because it was an attempt to try and make this webinar feel more like a workshop, so that you could get the maximum amount of learning out of it, rather than a whole range of theory that you then have to go away and maybe try and maybe not try. So I hope that works. So let me now bring you to the $64 question for those that are looking to get a credit, and that is the briefing on the exam.
So just before we do that, John, very quickly, I got an interesting question from Craig in the chat function.
Nice to hear you back, Craig.
Yes, he's sounding like he had a second interview, and he's got a phone interview later, so it will be kept on tenterhooks, maybe posted in the forum later, Craig, the result. But he's asking a question about researching the role prior to the interview. There's perhaps a job description that has a wide range in salary, sort of 45k to 85k, for example. How would you broach that? Would you broach that in the first interview and say, well, I noticed this, is it worth continuing? Those sorts of questions.
Right. So what I'm hearing here is that with a range of 45 to 85, you're concerned that the point that you're interested in may be, the midpoint, maybe at the high point of that range, and therefore would they consider. Now, let me give you a little bit of HR theory here. Organisations recruit based on grades. Most organisations have graded their organisation into people so that they can pay high salaries to individual contributors as well as to managers. You might recall in the years gone by, IBM came out and called its sales executives marketing representatives, and they called their techos systems engineers, and they made it very clear that if one wanted to stay as a systems engineer, become a consulting systems engineer, for example, one would be able to earn the same amount of money as a line manager. And so your concern is really, where would you be graded? Now, I put it to you that it's best to leave it alone. I think the time to deal with negotiation of remuneration is when one's offered the job. And if they came back and offered you the job at 45 and your minimum point was 70, then you would be asking yourself the question, okay, was this a waste of time? Or maybe it would give you an opportunity to resell yourself. And probably in the interview it will come up anyway if they've given that range. But remembering, they'll come in with a range, and they tend to try and employ people in the lower quartile of that grade so that they can then increase their remuneration on an annual basis and keep them within that grade. Happy to run another webinar on remuneration planning, but that's as good as I could do at this stage.
Thanks, John.
But we've got lots of room for lots of questions for anyone else, so please hold your questions, and we will open it for the floor in just a moment. So a briefing on the exam. There's 40 multiple choice questions. There'll be a few of them that'll be tricky. And what I mean by that, it'll ask you to think about the situation, and we will endeavour for it not to be too obtuse, but there needs to be some in there that actually question your understanding of the whole work, not just rote about, there'll probably be a question about weaknesses without giving the house away. There is one of 40. You get an hour to complete. You have one attempt. You need 50% to pass, and you need to have it completed between the 8th of April and the 15th of April. and there'll be other correspondence coming out to you from the organisation.
Sorry, folks, is that March? 8th of March to 15th of March? Or have I got the calendar completely arsed up?
Oh.
No, it's available next week, folks.
Sorry. Well, sorry, this one wasn't one of my slides. We're talking about the 8th of March to the 15th of March.
Yeah, just to confirm, folks. Sorry, John, about that slide.
Okay, 8th of March to the 15th of March, and so that it's fresh in your mind. It's fresh in your mind, and you're ready to go. Now, it's really important from my point of view to bring up the next slide, because this was the very first slide that was shown on webinar 1, because this is about the expectations that I've set, the outcome that I set, which was that you get the opportunity to reflect on your career to date and are given the opportunity to reset goals and determine an action plan and self-coach. You broaden your horizon on researching the job market and influencing important others in your employment, or give a balanced assessment on self-employment, because we have also made reference from time to time about being in one's own business. You gain a clearer view of your strengths and how they can be leveraged in a job or assessment interview. You gain confidence to take a project management approach to seeking job interviews. And you have the opportunity to practice in the privacy of your own space interview skills that, if applied well, can influence the interviewer to positively appreciate your strengths as they are relevant to the job. And I'm hoping that you can say that, John, I think your outcome has been achieved, and that you as the participants have been able to gain each one of those points and go forward with skills that you can absolutely apply. And with that in mind, Guy, it's time for us really to open it to the floor for questions, and we should do that.
Yeah, but I think it's fair to say that your presentations have been so detailed that the questions have been less forthcoming than some other courses. It's just all been logical, and that step-by-step approach has led, I think, to people understanding well. So we actually are fairly light on for questions. So type in if you are interested, folks, now any questions that you do have. But I suppose in the meantime, I'll just say, a massive thank you to James, Mia, Jess, Neil, Jason, and Chantel from IT Masters and CSU, and a big thank you to you, the students, for making this another rewarding experience and short course.
You're taking my thunder there, John.
I know. I'm going to give you the last word, though, John. It's going to be a big appreciation society. And speaking of which, I must say a big thanks to you, both from IT Masters and on a personal note.
Well, can we run a poll? Because there's a few things that we wanted to ask, really. Is it too late to run a poll?
No, absolutely not.
I mean, I think
we'll get people's perspectives.
If we're not having questions come forth, at least we can run a poll and get a sense, particularly on interviewing. I mean, do you have a poll that might be appropriate for that?
Yeah, absolutely. There we go.
So look, this is a chance, everyone, to get a gauge of just how you're feeling at the moment in terms of the whole preparation for interview. Go.
Yep, so that's launched. What best describes you after watching the interview demonstration? I've learnt enough to be interview ready right now. I've learnt the teachings but need more two-chair practices. I have to go through the slides some more for key points. I have to review all recordings because I am lost. I'll give that another 15 or 20 seconds for people to respond. And we've got a couple of questions flowing in as well, which is nice. Given it's the last lecture, folks, we thought we'd run a little bit longer. Hope you're all okay with that. And I think I'll close this poll now and share it on everyone's screen. and 6% think that they have learned enough to be interview ready right now, which is nice news. The overwhelming majority are looking for some revision, and which is nice to hear. No one is lost.
Excellent. Well, while we're on it, one of my hopes for this program is that confidence levels have lifted from wherever they were before. I mean, there'll be some people who were so confident when they came into this, there's been no change. But why don't we run a poll and just get a sense of how confidence levels have increased?
How confident are you? I'm feeling confident and ready for my next interview. I'm feeling significantly more confident than when starting. I'm feeling more confidence but not ready yet. And I suppose one of the questions that comes from this, John, is, I'll close that one now, I think, and share the screen. Some pretty interesting responses. Very few feeling confident and ready for the next interview. 8%. 55 significantly more confident, which is nice, and almost 40% not ready yet. Do you think it's a matter of just get ready to fail and keep going, or?
Well, look, I don't know the spread of people who have attended the webinars, so I don't know what subsectors of population, if you guess, that we have. So I think the important thing is that we step by step gain confidence by practicing. And I always think, you know, if you can take the easy parts first and practice those, and practice with people who love you, people who know you, and practice your interviews in that way, and then also be prepared to have a go, because I play tennis, and you know, I'm not a great tennis player, I can tell you, but I played tennis, and I started when I was quite late, and so for me it's still working at it all the time. But one thing I have found is if I play 3 times a week, which I try to every now and again, if I play 3 times a week, that I'm better than if I only play once. And so practicing, particularly now that you have a suite of templates and advice that's based on my experience over 30 years, and you can, you know, you draw your own judgment on that, then you know that you can go out with confidence and say, I can give this a try, because it's been tried before and it's been successful. But each one of you will bring your own personality. Remember we talked about personality in the series of webinars. Each one will have your own personality. Each one of you will vary between introvertedness and extrovertedness. And so don't beat yourself up. You know, remember that there's a role out there, a key role out there for everyone, and people sometimes who don't have the, if you like, the outward confidence, once they're in the job, their confidence is there to display because they have so much technical capability. So be positive and keep trying. That's what I would say. And what you said, you've got a couple of questions?
Yes, a couple of quick ones. How do you balance between lengthy and short answers? I know I struggle with keeping things succinct.
Very good question. There's 2 types of people. I'm using a very broad brush here. 2 types. Ones that are high in content. I guess you're listening to one. High in content, and those that are high in form. In other words, the people. I share a boat with another chap, and he is a guy, engineering background, who gets straight to the point. Says enough. You know, fantastic guy. Says enough. I'm somebody who would flower it up, say a whole lot more words. So when I'm in the interview, I notice what the sort of people are. Remember we talked about listening and observing, body language. We've covered what sort of people are we dealing with. Sometimes people, the questioner can go on and on and on. Sometimes they can talk so much about the company, one has to almost interrupt to be able to get the key points across. So it's a question of judgment. And when you've answered the question, it's never a bad thing to do as you observe me doing. Ask a question back. Does that broadly cover what you intended? Did that broadly cover the range of matters that you wanted me to address, that can slow things down or speed them up. Yep. Thank you, Guy.
Thanks, John. We've got another couple of good questions coming in. Craig has asked just a quick one. The difference between resumes and CVs, is there a difference? He's read that one is probably more detailed than another.
Curriculum vitae and resume, I think in our culture they're pretty interchangeable. In some cultures they're separate things, and the curriculum vitae tends to be seen as a longer document. I'm encouraging, as I said in the resume section, I'm encouraging the use of fairly short resumes and case studies as attachments that give a lot of the detail based on real experience. So 2 to 3 pages is plenty. If you've got a long, like if I had to write a resume and write up every company I've owned, every place I've worked, it'd be a big document. Well, I'd put the last maybe 15 years in there, and then before that I'd summarise it, right? And then back it up with case studies. The case studies, just like when you're writing an assignment, I suppose, your attachments are not always counted in the word count. In this case, they can be used to add extra bulk, but they're very specific, and they answer very specific questions, real stuff about real dates, real people, real experiences. I think you guess I'm pretty keen on case studies. Eh?
I'm getting that. One last question, I think, from Jonathan, and then we'll get to Bartek's, and I think we'll have to move on. Jonathan's is something that we have touched on lightly early on in the course, but I think it's an important question given we should try and touch on as many different groups as possible. What is your view on the market for more mature candidates, particularly where they may have long work experiences but may be trying to attempt at least a partial career change?
Well, I'm a great advocate for companies looking to employ people that are, in their more mature years, and I hear so often people say to me, it's so difficult, it's just so difficult to get a chance. And I often say to those folk, well, it's been a long time since you might have applied for a job, and now you're out there, and have you really exhausted your network? And really going back to all the material we've done, have you done this, have you done that, have you done this, have you done that? Have you really gone out and assessed which segment of the marketplace is going to give you the greatest opportunities? Have you actually rung the reception and asked to get the details, the email address of the HR director? Have you asked for the details of the general manager of whatever it may be? I mean, how much proactive work? Are you keeping a journal that identifies, all of the steps that you've taken? Are you giving yourself a pat on the back each week because you've taken a lot of activity? The one thing I'd say to you is, in an interview, if you're a mature person, over the age, whatever you want to call it, I don't think of 50 being very old, really, but if you want to call it over 50, then I would be saying in the interview that you're very open and you're looking forward to mentoring younger managers and younger supervisors based on your experience, and that your objectives from a career point of view are confined. Like, you may not anymore be seeking the role of managing director, of CEO. You might be very happy to find a role where you can leave work at the end of the day and that's it. And so you're no threat to these people, because quite often the thing that comes back about mature age folk is that they're perceived as a threat. Your emotional intelligence is high, your listening skills are high, then you don't have to even appear like a threat to the younger managers. But they may well come to you and say, look, I've got this situation. Would you mind giving me the benefit of your experience? And if you can bring that out at an interview, it might be a way in which you make more success.
Thanks. One last point from Bartek, who has correctly pointed out that there's a lot of information coming out of these webinars. He's wondering whether there's any suggestions for keeping up with it at this pace, and I'll take that one, John. I would really encourage everyone before they get into the exam to revise all of the materials on the course website. learn.itmasters.edu. I'll just type that in now as I'm talking. Has all of the relevant information from the course, all of the references, all of the paperwork and all of the questions. So have a look at those. And if you are struggling, feel free to post in the forum. You know, we're a group who are working together to get good outcomes. So go for a post and ask questions.
So Bartek, and thank you so much, Bartek, for asking the question. Bartek, I purposely have put a lot of material into this, and there are probably 4 or 5 or 6 workshops that one could run on aspects throughout this that we have, if you like, summarized into 4 1 hour, in this case, hour and 40 minutes or 30 minutes webinars. So yes, there is a lot of material, but hopefully there's a lot of material that's practical. And it's the practical parts I'd encourage you to separate and practice. And in that way, you'll be able to get through it bit by bit. And the videos or the webinars are available, I believe, for quite some time. And so therefore, you'll be able to come back and re-listen to them at your will. And I've also made an effort, particularly today, to put a lot of revision in. And last time I've really gone over all the revision again, so that we're, you know, there's an old adage in training: tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you've told them. It's all about repetition and revision, so that the points come home, and therefore you've got a benefit out of it, rather than just some theory that you walk away thinking, well, that was great, but you know, how can I apply it? So hopefully you can, Bartek.
Yeah, that's a really good point, John. The lectures are available for, I think, a full 12 months after the course. It's just you need to complete the exam within 1 week. So you'll still have access to this page, and something about this course, I think, is far more important than the certificate that you'll get once you complete the exam, are the skills that you'll take away, which sort of segues nicely, John, into my little spiel on you. I just really want to thank you, as I said, from both IT Masters and personally. And to everyone listening, it should come as no surprise that in the course of preparing these lectures, John's experience and mentality and aptitude for thinking laterally have forced me to reflect on how I seek to present, and even how I want to listen to people. So it's quite fundamental. He has also, I think, contributed to improved processes internally that will hopefully improve the short course experience in the long run. So he said early in the course that, what do you say, adults learn by doing, and it seems he's knocked a bit of sense into us. So it's been really great. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, John. And I might leave you to have the last hurrah. So good luck to you all, and good luck with your exams.
And thank you, Guy, and thank you to you, Guy, for your perseverance. I mean, just to let you know, Guy comes to us using the best of technology. Guy is overseas and comes in at a different time zone to us, and that time zone causes him some challenges quite often. But he has been here every time on time, and contributed greatly. I thank you, and I also thank Mia and Jess, who are relatively new to the team, have been just terrific, and they've really contributed to the quality of the program. I think we've worked well as a team. James, who you haven't heard from much this time round, but James, who runs the show, is his values and his efforts in bringing the quality team together is just outstanding. And I'd also like to thank Jason Houth, who was from CSU, who gave his presentation on the whole subject of the Masters. And I'll finish in saying to you that, look, the benefit of a Masters for those who are in roles that are in either management or senior technical functions, in other words, individual contributors, is the experience of going through the work and demonstrating one's capacity to synthesize large amounts of information and to write well, but also it's a message to a future employer, and it's a message to one's existing employer. The case study that I gave earlier on in these sessions about a young man that I gave some coaching to when he was doing a vocational course in computing, changed to a different vocational course, and ultimately ended up working for a very large bank. his personal aptitude, his listening skills, and his tremendous capability in working in difficult decision-making environments have moved him to a point where he was being considered for more senior management roles. He decided that he wanted to demonstrate to the organisation that a master's would really help, and he did it. It took him a while. He did it part-time, took him a while, and he did it. He now holds one of the most senior roles in the whole IT space of that organisation. That case study to me says that there is value in the Masters in a multifaceted way, so give it some consideration. I thank you so much for your perseverance on this program.